Begin the Katan Daf, Moed Katan Daf, begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yomim. The Gemara continues the discussion with the previous Daf that we were discussing, specifically one of the halachas of Avedus is that of Kriya, of tearing one's garment. So the Gemara introduced a story that was related to the fact of that we have to be called a Mesabel of Mesabel Imoy. Whoever you mourn over, you mourn with them when they're mourning, what's called secondary mourning. And in that discussion came up a story that the grandfather tore it for his grandson, and then he tore it again because he did when he was sitting down. And that the Gemara brought the source, how do you know if do Kriya standing up? Our Gemara continues on the halacha about doing Kriya standing up. Shis corresponds with Kazakh and Cheskel, Ta'anit and Davachaim. Appreciate was doing this for today's daf. Some of this is discussing today's daf, like we said, Kriya Moed, that a mourner has to tear his garment when he's standing, and Avul, the various prohibitions regarding a mourner, including Malacha, to engage in work, Rechitza Besicha, to bathe or apply oils, Tashmesh Amita, with sandal regarding marital intimacy, and wearing shoes, the Krisvalishnois, to read or learn any part of the Torah, Lanechfilin, to wear tefillin, and Hoylech Lebeis Avul, to go comfort another mourner, and Sheila Shalom, regarding greeting and being greeted by others. Now, regarding several of these prohibitions, the Gemara differentiates between Gimel Yom Rishayim, the first 3 days of mourning, Shiva, the rest of the 7 days of mourning, Shleishim, the first 30 days of mourning, and we're going to give Bis Chadish the entire first year. So begin the Katan Daf, Daf Chaf Aleph, 4 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara says over the teaching we just said on the previous lines. Amar Dama Bachama says, Menayin Lekriya Shema Umid. From where do you know that when one tears the garment because of a loss of a close relative, that he has to stand when he's tearing? Shneim, like it says in the pasuk, and we brought this in the previous step. It says that Eve got up and he tore. Why did he get up to tear? Because obviously Kriya has to be done when one is standing. Says the Gemara, although in the previous stop we didn't reject it, on this stop the Gemara rejects this interpretation because maybe what Eve did was not an obligation, maybe it was something extra, an excess, and I'll prove it to you that he didn't necessarily do only what was mandated. Because if you don't say this, what about the pasuk in Eve that says V'yogaz Israel, that he tore at the hair of his head? You think when someone's a mourner has to tear out a hair in his head? No. So maybe this was also extra. So the Gemara says, you're right. El Mahacha read the Gemara and that brings a difference. So it's a pasuk in small base. It says, V'yokum Melech, the king David, got up, the Yikras B'Godav, and he tore his garments when he was mourning. So you see that you have to get up to do Kriya. Says the Gemara, but he said also, maybe David Melech did something extra. And I'll prove to you there also, because if you don't say this, when it says within the pasuk, Yishkav Arza, that he was laying on the ground, Hachanami, you think that that's an obligation? Which Tosfos actually points out, although actually Yishkav Arza is not said in the context of his mourning over a child, it actually is said regarding the child of Bathsheba that the child didn't die. He was davening because the child that it shouldn't die, that it was sick. So he says that maybe because the prophet told him Mois Yamos that he's going to surely die, he considered him like he was dead already, and even though he was davening that he should live. And as Tosfos brings, you find in the Yerushalmi that Kadosh Baruch Hu knew the world was going to have a flood, so he was already mourning over his world before that the flood even came. So that's what the Gemara means that Yishkav Arza, Al Kapanim, this that he was doing for mourning, you think that's an obligation? You think David didn't do more than what was necessary? But Vitani, in the Bryce and the Gear says, Yoshin al Gabi Mita, if the Aval is laying on the bed, al Gabi Kise on a chair, al Gabi Yoni on a mortar, which is something that you crush spices in, or Gedoyla, the Gear says, Mikulan, more than them all, even if you're al Gabi Karka, even if you're sleeping on the ground, Lo Yotza Yidei Chavasai. You have not fulfilled your obligation until you turn over the bed and you sleep on that. Because, and Bama B'Yechni explains, the reason why you wouldn't fulfill your obligation as a mourner, even if you're sleeping on the floor, Shleikim Kvisa Mita, you didn't fulfill the obligation of turning over the bed. So that's all that you have to do, not sleep on the ground. So David was sleeping on the ground, what was he doing? Obviously, obviously he was doing more than what was necessary, so don't bring me a raya, proof from David HaMelech, oh, he stood up to tear his garment. Okay, maybe he did more than what was necessary. On that he responds back, he says, no, it's not true. David didn't do anything extra. Ke'ein arza. When it says that he slept on the ground, it doesn't mean he literally slept on the ground. It means he slept like on the ground, because he turned his bed upside down and he slept on it, but really he didn't do anything extra, and therefore you could bring a proof from David that when he stood up to tear his garment, obviously that's the halacha that you have to do the kriya, that to tear the garment when one is standing. Now, turn on the Brisa, continue with the halachas of mourning, which is here in this parak in Eila Megalchin, in the third parak of Moed Katan. So Eila Dvarim She'aval Asabem. The following things are things that a mourner is forbidden. Now Tosfos points out there are many things not mentioned in this list. So he says, for example, here we're only mentioning things of that aval is forbidden in, not things that he's commanded in. For example, turning over the bed, it's not a prohibition, it's a commandment. So too, cloaking his head. He's only saying things that are forbidden. So too, regarding his not wearing tefillin or not greeting people, also not mentioned, because that's not for all the days of the morning, as the Gemara is going to say later on. It also didn't mention laundry, because that's included in rechitza, in bathing, even though previously enough Rav Menalva brought 2 psukim for rechitza and techbaisis. But of the things which are not all week, those things we didn't mention. So therefore, there's a limited list for what we're saying over here. So asa b'malacha, the morning is for them to do work. Uberchitza, to bathe himself, besicha, anoint himself, ubetash mashamita, marital intimacy, v'nil zesantla, wearing shoes. And vasalikas b'tayid of minavim miksuvim, he's not allowed to learn from the chumash, and he's not allowed to learn navi and miksuvim. And Taisa points out that why don't we do now these days certain things that the Gemara tells us about the Ava, let's say, covering our head or turning over the bed. So it says we rely on what the Rishalmi says, that an achsanoic guest doesn't have to turn over his bed, so that he shouldn't say that he's a cherish. What is a cherish? Meaning a machashif, that he's doing sorcery. So he says, same thing us, we live amongst the Gentiles, and we have all the cleaning help and the servants or whatever, and if they would see us turning over the beds, they'd think we're doing some type of sorcery, and therefore we don't do the turning over the beds. So there's also another reason why we don't turn over beds, because our beds, you could sleep easily on it when it's right side up or upside down. So therefore it's not even recognizable you're turning upside down, because at least in Taisa's times, they had the canopies by the bed, the condisim, which are these poles. So essentially it's legs, either way you turn the bed, you can have legs sticking out where you have that, so it wouldn't help, as the Gemara says later on, that dargish or a certain type of bed, you don't have to turn it upside down. Additionally, he says the reason why we don't do atifas areish, because atifas areish is what's called atifas yishma'elim. Like when we put our talis, we cover till our mouth, and Taisa says it would just make one big joke if we did that, because who walks around like that? Imagine a guy putting his thing over his head. So Taisa says, therefore, certain halachas that we mentioned in the Gemara, we don't do. But al kapanim, you're not allowed to learn from Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, and Melishnas, B'Mishnah Medrash, Shalom Mishnayis, and Medrash, Ba'alachas, Uba'ashas, Ba'agodais, which Taisa has a discussion, Machlekes, regarding what does that include? Did not let learn Torah? Is that anything in Torah? Even like what we learn on Tisha B'Av, on Iyuv and Kinnis and Devar Haram Shabbayirmiyah? Or no, that would be permitted, about it's only because it's not supposed to bring you simcha, as Rashi explains. The Gemara previously told us that Tezvav Med Aleph, Hashem said, Yicheskel Hanik Doin, be silent and don't say anything. And that's how you see that it's not allowed to learn Torah. But the Gemara in Sukkot of Chafei Manal tells us that Aval is chayv all mitzvah amos b'Torah except b'tefillin. So that's other mitzvahs. But those that bring simcha, you see Rashi also learns like that. Those that bring simcha, like learning Torah, that you're not allowed to do, Pekud Yeshem B'Shem Mesamchilev, and therefore it would sound like that. At least those inyanim that don't bring simcha, like learning halachas of Avelis or learning about the tragedies that befell Klal Yisrael, that those things in Aval would be allowed to learn. Now, but however, says the Brayso, but if let's say the Kehillah, the public needs him to give a drasha, so then he doesn't hold back, even though he's an Aval, he's going to give a shiur. Actually, was such a story that the son of Rabbi Yisi passed away in Tzipari. And he came into the Beis, he gave a drasha all day long, even though he was an Aval. Similarly, Rabbi Bechana, Isra Beimilsa, something of a tragedy befell his family. He thought, okay, he's not going to go out to give the drasha. He said to him, if the public needs you, you don't hold back. Now, he thought he was going to give his regular drasha as he usually does, which in Talmudic times, they used to have a turgoman, a translator, who would go ahead and amplify to the Kehillah. Talmud Chacham is not always the best speaker. He's able to hunt the greats of different tribes, name the orator and the one who's amplifying it. Rav told him, no, but in the Brayso B'Vachel, I'm a turgoman. You could come and give the drasha, but as long as you don't do it in the normal way of having the interpreter go ahead and drasha. So how should he do it? Because the Maisa of the Talmud Chacham, he's not able to give the shir that people can hear it. So Kiyod the Tanzek, we learned the following Brayso. Maisa was the story of Meis B'nei Rabbi Yehuda Eloi. The son of Rabbi Eloi passed away. The Nichnas HaBeis HaMedrash went to the Beis HaMedrash. The Nichnas Reb Chananya ben Akavia v'Yosha b'Tzidai. He had Reb Chananya ben Akavia sit on his side. The Loch Hashul Reb Chananya ben Akavia, so the Aval, he whispered it to Reb Chananya ben Akavia. Reb Chananya ben Akavia looked Turgaman. We had another person in between, and he said it to the Turgaman. The Turgaman the Shmila Rab, and the translator said it to the public. So another one in between. Therefore, that breaks it up. And that's a way that's permitted to do it, but not in the normal way of saying it straight to the Turgaman. So we're in the Brayso, continue with the halachas of a mourner. Aval morning, Gimel Yom Rishayim, the first 3 days of the morning is Asla Nech Tefillin. He's not allowed to put on tefillin. Now, however, Mishlishi ve'elech, but from day 3 and onwards, and actually Mishlishi b'chlal, the third day is also included even, that Taisa learns as a halacha mixim kekuloi, but it's because mutal nech tefillin on day 3, it's permitted to put on tefillin. Rashi says because the primary avelis is only for 2 days, as the Gemara is going to actually bring the psukim, v'yitmu yimei evel b'chi Moshe, it's only a plural of 2. So from day 3 and onwards, you're allowed to put on tefillin. Now, the B'Pam Chadash is, but if let's say a new person comes to be Menachem Avol on the 3rd day, even so, in the Chaylis, you don't have to take off your tefillin, because even though there's what to be concerned about, maybe they're going to say, I see his Avol is wearing tefillin, maybe the first 2 days he also put on tefillin. No, you don't have to be concerned. Rabbi Shloimy says you don't have to be concerned. You could, on the 3rd day, you're allowed to put on tefillin, and even if a new person comes, you don't have to take it off. Sure, he says, Avol Beis Yom Rishon Masla Nech Tefillin. He says Avol not the first 3 days, but the first 2 days, and I'll wear tefillin. And Mishen, but from day 2, and Mishen B'chlal, and even the 2nd day included, is Mutal Nech Tefillin. You're allowed to put on tefillin because he holds, the way Rashi explained, the primary veil is only 1 day. So therefore, on day 2, you're allowed to put on tefillin. But he holds from B'Pam Chadash, but if someone new comes on the 2nd day of the Shiva, then Chaylis, then you take off the tefillin. Now, Amar Masli says, my time what's reading the laws that he holds that the primary morning is for 2 days, and therefore tefillin you can put on from day 3 and onwards. Because the Chassidus says, passing the bottom, it says, "V'yitmu yimei b'chi evel Moshe," that it stopped the days of the crying of the morning of Moshe, which yimei is plural, which sounds like 2 days. But and Taisa says that although this pasuk just says regarding morning, we apply it to that of tefillin more to than anything else, because when a person is mar nefesh, because he's a bittered soul, because he lost a relative, he's misal ba'afer, and that's not pe'er, and therefore that would exclude that of tefillin. Now, Amar Ravina says, my time Rabbi Shloimy, what's the reason Rabbi Shloimy that he holds that the primary morning is only 1 day, and that from day 2 you can wear tefillin already? Because the Chassidus says the pasuk in Amos. Pasuk says, we quoted this pasuk previously, of Vafachti chagechem la'evil, I'm going to turn your holidays into mourning. It says further over there, I'm going to replace it ke'evil yachal, like the mourning of an individual. And Vachlisa, its bitter end is Kiyoim Mar, is like a bitter day, meaning you see that Kiyoim Mar is in the singular, Kiyoim is the bitterness is only 1 day, and therefore from day 2 you can already put on tefillin. Now the Gemara says, what does each one do with the other one's pasuk? This said he says 1 day, but there's another pasuk that says he made in the plural. So I'm lucky to tell you, Shani Moshe, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is different. They talk about Avla because that was a very intense morning. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, imagine Moron Shel Chol Yisrael, Navi Shel Chol Navim. So therefore, that was for 2 days. Says Gemara, what does he do with the pasuk that its end is like a bitter day? It's in the singular, not 2 days. Says the Gemara, the primary bitterness is 1 day, but as Rashi says, the avelis is for 2 days. So therefore, he held you cannot wear tefillin for 2 days. Now, Amma Ulay says, interesting the way he divides it up. He says, Allah is a Gevlaza regarding chalitza, which is that if someone new comes on day 3, meaning he held that you cannot put on tefillin for 2 days, and on the 3rd day you could put on. Not only that, he says if someone new comes, you don't have to take it off. So he says, halacha like Rabbi b'chalitza, that if someone new comes on day 3, you don't have to take it off. Now, halacha b'shu b'hanacha. But halacha like b'shu like regarding putting on, meaning just taking off and putting on. The halacha like b'shu by putting on, that on day 2 is when you're allowed to put on tefillin, but not on day 3. So he's saying on day 3, you don't have to take off, but if someone new is there, you're not allowed to put it on. But halacha like b'shu is that to put on, that you're allowed to put on day 2. Now, the following question. B'sheni, on day 2, l'ula according to Ula, chayletz, do you have to take it off? Or ain't chayletz, or do you not have to take it off? In other words, when did Ula say, Allah Chazak Laza, that you don't have to take off the tefillin? That he said on day 3. But regarding day 2, since that he's saying Allah Chazak B'shua, who B'shua says that you could put on, but you got to take off, so I don't know, on day 2, do you have to take off or not? Because day 2 is more severe. Maybe day 2 you would have to take it off when someone new comes over there. So it says, that Amma Ula, he says, you take off and you put on day 2, even 100 times during the daytime. So yeah, when a new person comes, you do have to take it off. And when there's no new person there, then you can put it on. So therefore, yeah, day 2 is different than day 3. Day 3, you don't have to take it off when the new person comes. Day 2, you could put on, but you would have to take it off, like Rabbi Shloimy. Tanya Machzim in the Brisa that Yehuda ben Tema Ema, he says, on day 2 you would take it off, put on, take off, put on, even 100 times, depending if a new person comes in. However, Rav Amma, he disagrees. Says, Kibbutz Sheniach, once you put it on day 2, you don't have to take it off anymore for Pan Chadashas for a new person. Says the Gemara, how could you say that? But Rav himself has been quoted previously on the previous Daf. Daf Chaf regarding turning over the bed, that he said, Aloha Katana did not. So the Aloha is like the Tana of our Mishnah. That the Amar Shleish that says for 3 days is the primary mourning, and therefore he held that you have to have had already 3 days before Yom Tiv to be already Mekayim the Halacha. So also you should require 3 days not to put on tefillin. Why is he saying that on day 2 you could put it on, and not only that, you don't have to take it off? I thought the primary Avelis is for 3 days. So the Gemara, yes, you're right, the primary Avelis is 3 days, but it's continued in days, but mitzvah shani. A mitzvah is different. In other words, since it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin, so it's a mitzvah to put on right away on day 2, and that we don't wait till after 3 days. Continue on this Hagdara of the first 3 days. Aval, a mourner, Gimel Yom Rishon, the first 3 days, is also b'malachas. Not do any work. And even a pauper who is provided from charity, who needs the money, is not allowed to work. After the 3rd day and onwards, he could do it discreetly in his house. Which Taisus has a discussion. The Taisus Harav says it's only going on misparis from that tzedakah. But someone that doesn't get from tzedakah is not allowed to do work for all 7 days of the show. But Taisus at the end says in the name of Ben Ishmael that no, this is going on all mourners, because it doesn't say Mikam Eilach Isa Onibitzin. It just says Afalo Isa Mikam Eilach Isa Bitzin B'Tech Beisa. So it's Machlekes and Taisus. Who is it going on? There's only a pauper. Every mourner could do it discreetly in his house after the 3rd day. Have a Isha, a woman that's a mourner, she could spin with her spindle in her house after the 3rd day. Another halacha regarding a mourner in the first 3 days. He's not allowed to go to another house of mourning to go there. Now, but after the 3rd day, he can go. Let's say there's a tragedy and other few people are sitting in Avelis. So after the 3rd day, then he's allowed to go to those other mourners. Now, interesting, Taisus brings, the Taisus Rav, that this is what we rely on, that we go to shul on Tisha B'Av. Because on Tisha B'Av, we're all Avelim. And how are you going to shul on Tisha B'Av? Because he says it's like a mourner going to visit other mourners after day 3. Which he says, I don't know if it's a good minhag that we go to shul on Tisha B'Av. But one thing Taisus wants to say from Taisus Rav is that he considers Tisha B'Av like after the 3rd day of Avelis, because it was like within the 3rd day of Avelis, you wouldn't be able to go to shul because an Avel is not supposed to go to visit other mourners. And the nafkamin is, as Taisus said previously regarding tefillin, we wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av because we consider it after day 3, because within the first 3 days you don't wear tefillin, and we wear tefillin not by mincha. So obviously we consider like it's like in Avelis after the 3rd day of the Shiva. And now, however, although he could go after the 3rd day of Avelis to another house of mourning, he doesn't sit in the place where those consolers are sitting. He sits in the place of those who are being consoled, meaning he sits near the mourners. Again, continuing regarding regarding a mourner in the first 3 days of mourning. It's forbidden to have any greetings. From after the 3rd day till the 7th day of the Shiva, he responds, but he doesn't ask. As you go, yeah. How do they pick up? There's, whatever, right? There's no greeting, right? Now, Mikam Be'elach, after the Shiva is over, he could ask and respond in the normal way. Now, the Gemara asks on the Brisa, tell me in the first 3 days, it's forbidden to have any greetings with people. Says Gemara in the Brisa, interesting story. There was a story that the sons of Rabbi Kiva passed away. And a tragedy, who knows what happened, his sons passed away. So all of Klal Yisrael came, and they made a huge levaya for the sons of Rabbi Kiva. Now, when the Kila was taking leave of the levaya, Rabbi Kiva gets up on a large bench, and he says like this, makes an announcement. Our brothers, the house of Yisrael, the Klal Yisrael, listen to me. Even if had I buried 2 sons that were chasanim, menuchim he, meaning referring to himself, would be consoled because of the honor that you did for me. Maybe you came because of Akiva. How do you come Akiva Pashut? There's many Akivas in the street, in the marketplace. You don't all go to Menachem every single Akiva that's making a Levaya. There's a reason why Hashem does that it can be the size that it is. It doesn't have to be a few square blocks. Not everyone goes to every single Levaya. What do you say? Why are all the Klais who are coming to me, to Menachem me by the Levaya of my sons? Because it says a pasuk in Tehillim. It says the Torah of God is in his heart. Meaning you're coming because you know that I'm the Rebbe Akiva. Oh, if that's the case, for sure that your reward is double, because you're coming for Kavod HaTeirah. You're coming because you know that Rebbe Akiva, the God Ladar, that's why you're coming. Go home in peace. So the way Rashi explains it, you see that when the words L'chul Beischel L'Shalom, he was being Shoel B'Shleimim. He was greeting them. He was saying something of a greeting. I thought that in the first 3 days, there's no greetings going on whatsoever, and here Rebbe Akiva, right there with Levaya, is being Shoel B'Shleimim. Says the Gemara, but Kavod Rabbim Shami. You're right. The first 3 days you're not supposed to greet, but the honor for the public, Kavod Rabbim, where he was talking to Klai over here, is different, and therefore he's allowed to go and give a greeting to them. The Gemara continues asking, and the Brisa said like this. It says Megimel Vad Zayin, from day 3 till day 7, Meishav in the show. He can't greet others, but he can respond to greetings from other people. After the shiur is over, then he could ask and respond in the normal way. Says the Gemara, it seems to be a contradiction from the following brisa, because this brisa is going to tell us that within the first 30 days he cannot be shoel. He cannot greet anyone else for the shloshim. He cannot greet anyone else. And we said that after the shiur is over, that he could greet anyone in the normal way. The brisa says, if someone finds his friend as a mourner, if it's within the shloshim, he speaks with him words of consolation. He doesn't ask him how he's doing. He doesn't greet him. After the shloshim is over, then he asks him how he's doing. But to the contrary, then he doesn't. Again, they're almost like inversely related. Someone who you have to console is not shalom. He's not complete. You don't ask him how he's doing. You say, you want to know, right? So I'm saying after the shloshim is over, then you could be shalom, but then you don't talk tanchumen anymore. Before the shloshim is over, then you speak words of consolation and you don't ask him how he's doing. Now, Mesa Ishtoi, but let's say his wife passed away. But Nasi Isha Acheres, and he married another wife within the shloshim, which Tosfos and Rashi both discuss how that's possible. Usually you have to wait shalosh regalim if a wife passed away. But Rashi says, like, for example, let's say he doesn't have any sons. So as the Gemara is going to tell us later on, then he's allowed to marry quicker, or Tosfos brings maybe if he has very young sons, that he needs someone to help take care of, then you're allowed to get married within the shloshim. So if that's the case, although we said that you talk words of consolation to someone with the shloshim, but if here he got remarried within the shloshim, in your shul comes lebeso, you're not going to his house, but to go speak in words of consolation for him to console him, because his second wife, his new wife, is going to feel insecure that they're speaking about, oh, your first wife, what a tzaddikus she was, right? And here she is, and she would bring out, every time I came to visit, she would bring out trays and trays of cake, and this new wife is not doing that, right? She's in the first weeks of a marriage, so you have to have some seichel. The Gemara says that you don't go into the house to speak words of consolation. But matzav shog, you find him in the street, in shul, in the coffee room, whatever. Then you tell him with what's called a loose lip, with a heavy head, that you try to say it in the most delicate way, about his loss of his wife. But one thing we see from this brisa is that within the first 30 days, we said Ein Shel B'Shloimei. We said you don't greet him. Now, if you don't greet him, for sure, the Avil himself is not greeting others, because before we said that if anything, that his responding, we had said that he responds and he's not going to ask others how they're doing. So if we're seeing we're seeing here that that you can't ask him how he's doing, which is more lenient than him asking others. So for sure he cannot ask others how they're doing within the shloshim. But before we said in the previous brisa, after the shiva, you could greet each other in the normal way. So how to resolve that within 30 days? Could they be greeting or not? So Omar David Bar Alvin, he says that the brisa that says that within the shloshim, after the shiva is over, they could do the greeting in the normal way. That means hu shel b'shlem acher. That means he could greet others, because Shachem Shruin B'Shalom. He can greet others because others are actually dwelling in peace. But the Bryce that says that within 30 days, Ein Shal B'Shleimai, is Achim Ein Shal B'Shleimai. Others cannot greet him because he's not dwelling in peace. You don't greet him. You don't say Shalom because I'm not Shalom. So don't tell me Shalom. So it's not a contradiction. He could greet them after the Shiva, before the Shleish, but they can't greet him. Says, how could you say that? But Miktanur, when the Bryce says that after the first 3 days, after the Shleisha, Meshiv, he can respond. Obviously, that within 30 days we do ask him how he's doing. So how could you say in the second Bryce that within 30 days you're not Shalom B'Shleimai? If even during the Shiva you can ask him how he's doing. Because after day 3 we said he responds. Says he, well, no, that's not true. This that we said after the first 3 days of the Shiva that he responds is Deloyadi. In other words, we said he responds for those who don't know that he's a mourner. So he responds. But someone that knows he's a mourner, you're right, cannot ask him how he's doing for the whole Shleishim period. He says, well, wait a second. If that's the case, then you tell me that when he's responding after the first 3 days of the Shiva, for someone who doesn't know, it's in Hasanami. What's Hasanami? So it says, then even within the first 3 days, also he should respond for someone that doesn't know he's an Aval and ask him in the first 3 days, how's he doing? You should say, oh, okay, look, along. Because what's the difference between the first 3 days and after the first 3 days? Says, well, no, the difference is Hasam over there that we learned that all the first 3 days is forbidden to have any greetings. Maidalahu. We actually let the guy who's greeting know that he's an Aval. And actually does not respond to the guy. Because the first 3 days are more chamer. Over here, after the first 3 days, you don't have to notify the guy who doesn't know that he's a mourner. He just responds and he says, "Oh, thank you so much for asking." How. But within the first 3 days, you don't answer. You tell him, "Look, he's an Aval. He's not gonna return the greeting." But regarding him greeting others, that could be even within the Shleishim. But regarding others asking him how he's doing, although he'll respond, but they're not supposed to ask him until after the Shleishim. But I think the Gemara has another question. But the Gemara has from the following Brisa, which is difficult on this that we have learned, that, okay, at least after the Shleishim, then they can ask him how he's doing, seems to be difficult from the following Brisa. The Brisa says like this, if someone finds his friend as a mourner, but within the year, the 12 months, so you speak with him words of consolation, but like we said, you don't greet him. After 12 months are over, ask him how he's doing, and then you don't speak with him words of consolation. But you speak to him what's called, from the side, indirectly, where you tell him, oh, you should be consoled, but you don't mention the name of the one who passed away. So someone meets someone who says, oh, your mother passed away, okay, and I didn't know, so you're not going to, within the year, you're going to mention that fact. After the year, you're just going to say it indirectly. Amr May, it says interesting. It says, if someone finds someone that was a mourner after the 12 months have passed, and you tell him words of consolation, say, "Oy Nebuch, your father, oy vey." What could be compared to? Someone broke a leg and it healed already. So he finds a doctor. Usually it's the young doctors. He finds a doctor and he says to him, "Come to me. Don't worry, I'll break it and I'll heal it." Right? That you should know that my medicine is very good. I mean, people oftentimes, a very deep psychological insight. A lot of times people want to be menachem people. They want to help people, not because they really want to help people. They want to help. They want to be like, "Oh, come, I'll break your leg and I'll show you how I can heal it." After the year is over, the person's already menuchem. Stop it. Don't be menachem anymore. And that's what he compared to. But one thing we see in this brisa is that you're not supposed to greet the mourner. Forget about within the shleishim. You're not supposed to greet him for the whole year. So what are you saying that it's only within the shleishim? So you want like it's not difficult. Regarding a parent, you don't greet the mourner until after 12 months have passed. Regarding other relatives, then you greet him after 30 days. I think Gemara still has another question. It says, wait a minute, Hasan Nami, they're also, after 30 days that you tell me about its other relatives, why don't you say Yidabe when Tanchumim min Atzad? Why don't you say that, let's say 40 days after he lost his brother or he lost his child, then, just like my father and mother, you told me that even after the year is over, you're going to talk to him words of consolation, min Hatzad. So why when we say that, Achel Lamed, that you don't mention the fact that you talk with him words of consolation at all. Says Gemara, En Chanami, you're right. Umay, what do we mean that after Shleishim, Eini Medabe Maitan Kumen, you don't speak to him words of consolation? It's Kedark in a normal way. Medabe Menatzah, but you would speak to him words of consolation indirectly from the side, and therefore it would be the same thing technically as that of when any time a person hears a loss, you're not going to mention the name of the one who passed away, but you're going to talk Tisnachim, everything should work out after the Shleishim for other relatives and after the year for parents. But again, we resolved the contradiction regarding Rabbi Shloimy. We said that regarding others asking him, Shakrim is 30 days, for parents is a year. For him asking others, that would be already after the Shiva, that he could ask others how they're doing, because they're dwelling in Shalom and he's not. And this that we said that after 3 days you respond, that's for someone who doesn't know. Someone doesn't know, he'll respond. But really, you're not supposed to ask him until after the Shleishim or until after the year. But within the first 3 days, even if someone doesn't know and asks him, hey, how are you doing? He's not going to respond, and he's just going to say that he's no. Thank you.